Hello, welcome to the Doublethink Dialogues podcast. I'm Edwin, and today I'm here with
John,
Sue,
and Jet.
We're about 2 weeks from the UK election, and well, it started quiet. It's turned into a bit of a wild one. I guess what I was thinking to do is maybe we can go through with the parties and see what the status of all of them, from our opinions are, and then we can sort of then get an impression of how the whole game is going after that. Because I wanted to start with the Tories specifically. Since they're the incumbents and they're the ones who have sort of dropped the ball, shall we say, from a North American sports perspective. So who wants to chime in first on your thoughts on the Tories so far and their approach to this election?
Well, why haven't they done what Luke said they're going to do during the 14 years they've been in power? It's a simple question.
Yes, that's
why are you saying you can do this now when you haven't done it before?
Yeah. And then now they're starting to pretend to do stuff like the week before the election or something. Yeah, that is the question, isn't it? Well, why do you think that was? Do you think they were just coasting, or
Huge majority, so they had it easy for so long they thought they'd get away with it.
Yeah, it's strange they didn't think it was going to fall apart.
Well, you can tell they're fairly desperate because something separate of doing, a group of us been writing to all our parliamentary candidates about food poverty. Now, okay, you'd normally expect a sort of one-line answer from a candidate or MP. Two large responses, both from Julian Smith and Andrew Jones. And I think there's a lot of, here I am, I'm a really good person, and please vote for me.
My experience has been pretty good letters from Andrew Jones when I've written to him. I haven't gotten anything back from anyone else that I've written to in general. So that's interesting. And we get the Lib Dems dropping flyers all over the place on our street, especially. So I don't know what's up with that. But yeah, I think it's funny to watch Rishi and Keir Starmer trying to pretend like they're the average person right now. I don't know if you've been following any of that, either of you guys.
Yeah, I heard the claim that of the hardships that maybe may even have been from you, so stop me if it was, but that basically he was suffering. He had suffered hardship. It was you, wasn't it? You know that
Rishi.
They hadn't had Sky.
Yeah,
that was their poverty.
Yeah, he had to go without. So and when he was asked what he had to go without with, he can only come up with Sky TV. that was his version of poverty.
He may know more about it than us. It may be that to a sufficient part of the population that does sound wow. They went without Sky TV.
No, I don't think it really cuts, And so what do? You marry a billionaire and your financial problems are sorted. Unfortunately, there aren't enough billionaires to go around.
Well, he not only married a billionaire, but then he worked with Goldman Sachs as well. So a double whammy there.
Yes, not exactly minimum wage.
Banker.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know your thoughts on the Tories' chances in this election. Where do they place out of the top? Let's say. Well, I've got listed sort of 7 factions here. Well, 6, I guess, because one has dropped out. So where do you think they will place in the top?
It depends on how many votes Reform take off them.
Well, that's the question, I guess. Yeah.
If Reform take the votes off them in the Sarah Martin votes, and they lose them, they're going to take one hell of a hammering.
So do you think the Tories will manage to hold on to opposition place, or do you think they're going to lose it?
It may be third.
Maybe third. Let's see. Anyone else? Well, John, what do you think?
Well, first to go back to what I think of them before I say how little I think of their chances. I'm actually a lot more forgiving of the Conservative government than most people, I think. I mean, Boris eating a slice of cake doesn't bother me in the slightest, nor does Rishi Sunak.
Rishi,
whoever, I don't.
Whatever.
Yes. I'll have forgotten by the time, in a few weeks' time anyway. Him not staying 2 days in at the D-Day celebrations, I mean, which a lot of people seem quite exercised about.
I'm a veteran. I didn't care less that he left.
Yeah.
No, he's not the head of state. That's what we have a monarchy for. If the monarch can't tip up because he's too busy
or too ill
or whatever, well, there's enough of them, isn't he?
Too busy getting his satanic portrait painted.
Yeah, that was weird, wasn't
it? Yeah. It was less forgivable for me, I'd probably more forgotten now, is the compulsory lockdown, rather than the optional being careful, and the spending on furlough, and then you ask Rishi claiming, he's come in to replace all the damage that whoever the other woman was. I think, well, no, it was you that spent the X number of £1 billion on which in retrospect you think, well, was that wise? But over and above that, but I mean, I would say with them there are several sufficient reasons not to vote for them, but to make it impossible to vote for them, however much you want to. And the other for me would be immigration, with the starting from yes, we'll keep it below 100,000 and gradually drifting up to over a couple of million. And really, what you promise you will do with no if, bringing it down after that doesn't really cut much ice with me.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to say, I mean, my attitude on immigration is probably different from a lot of people's, but it's probably more in line with that of the Palestinians in the 1920s, who say basically this is ours. Yes, we can cope with minorities, but we don't want a lot more of you coming.
Yeah. We may not want to get into that discussion just yet with the Israel Palestine.
Yeah, but I mean, it seems to me the same issue, and why some people are lined up exactly opposite to on our immigration than on Palestine immigration. I don't know, but on a local level, I mean, as you say, Andrew Jones is a responsible or active respondent to letter writers. I don't know if he ever actually any of those. Well, they have led to minor action for me. He has referred things to ministers for me, and I've had responses from ministers that were just as crass as if I'd got 10,000 signatures on a petition and got a ministerial response. But he got me over that hurdle of having 14 signatures rather than 10,000.
Right.
So that is good. But he is on the sort of soft wing of the party. So I personally, not on a personal level, but I wouldn't want him to be among the surviving rump of the party. He'd be the one of the ones I'd prefer to go. Although I understand he's actually forecast to have a better chance than most of coming through it.
Yeah, it's hard to say what his competition is here, but I mean, it is a Lib Dem territory, so we'll see, I guess. Where do you place the Tories' chances then? 1 through 6.
1 through 6. Well, they might be one of. You mentioned someone's dropped out. Was that the Independent?
That's Reclaim. Reclaim has dropped out, and they've.
Oh, see, I did. Yeah. Right. To be honest, I didn't even know they were in. I mean,
they kind of disappeared.
I mean, I did like Lawrence Fox at one point, but he had unnecessarily shot himself in the foot, which you'd say fine as an expression of free expression, but you lose. There's a limit to how far you can take free expression. Once you're trying to get votes.
There were comments that were completely unreasonable to make. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Whatever you believe. Yeah. So I noticed that no one wants to put a number on this. So
well,
it's a third maybe.
I think I would see him beating 1 and maybe. Well, actually, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm 50-50 as well.
I would have thought he could still come second, actually.
But you think you're talking
locally?
Locally.
Yeah.
But nationally, where would you put the Tories?
Still probably second in terms of number of seats, but I mean that's to even be asking that question about Labour or Conservative is pretty dramatic stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, because there is a large segment of the right in the country at the moment is trying to more or less erase them from existence. So.
Yeah, you'd like not only to knock them into, you would want them to actually disband as a result, which is part of our problem. I mean, I think we could have done with a 3 strikes and you're out view of politics. That over the years, either Labour or Conservative would, I think, been trounced often enough that they would just have disbanded, and then the whole thing could have reformed. I mean, I see them as like 2 punch-drunk boxers, and they each kind of hold each other up. They each force a kind of solidarity on the other. If one went, the other would kind of begin to fracture, and then the whole map could be redrawn.
I've heard it described by several people as 2 cheeks of the same butt, I think it was.
Well, centralised politics, isn't it? I mean, they're either right to centre or left to centre, and eventually in the Commons, they agree on 70% down the middle, and then they fight over the other bits.
Yeah. So, Sue, where would you place the Tories' chances nationally?
50-50. I don't think it's as clear cut as people think. Mainly because Labour is so dire and so uninspiring. I think that's a lot of it. No policies. They should walk it, and I think that's what they're assuming. But I don't think people are always as such pushovers when it comes to voting as they think. It's just so difficult. It may even be a hung parliament.
Yeah. I mean, I think you are sort of voicing one of the opinions, definitely, which is, yeah, it's going to be a weird one because no one really, well, some people want Labour, but most people don't really want Labour. No one really wants the Tories, and but everyone feels like probably we should say something. So
Yes.
so it's going to come down to the day, really, isn't it?
And I think a lot of people are actually, see themselves as conservative. And if you ask a small C conservative, well, what have the Conservatives actually conserved? It certainly wasn't the country or the nation in demographic.
They've conserved their rich bodies. Now, come on, be fair. They've done
However,
very
these
well
days the
by
left has their
friends.
share of rich buddies as well, so it's all
Oh,
over the
don't they
place,
all?
isn't
And
it?
that in effect is the flaw in politics, because people now who go into politics tend to have money and the support behind them so they can afford to go in it. Because let's be honest, if you're poor, you're not going to be able to have an internship for 2 years with no money. And they promote people like themselves, as we all do to an extent, don't we?
I think one of the things we have to remember, and I was sort of making myself aware of this again recently, is the population, the people, let's say, that our democracy is currently supposed to represent, have only had a say in the process for a little over, about 100 years now. Prior to that, we the people had no say in politics whatsoever. The system was not built for us.
Well, a full franchise in the UK didn't come through till 1974.
Which one, sorry?
A full franchise for the UK didn't come through till 1974. For some part of Northern Ireland, they were still backward for local elections.
Yeah, and they just gave everyone.
So it's much less than 100 years.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking sort of post World War II, when they had sort of general suffrage.
Well, post World War One, it was
World War I,
28 was the full suffrage.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to 100 years for that bit.
Yeah, so I was basing it on that. Yeah. But regardless, it's such a short amount of time compared to, originally it was set up, wasn't it, for the Lords to have a
the Great Lord.
So that's more or less where it stayed, and then just kind of pretended.
Well, we're not one of the people that don't listen to anybody.
I mean, the Commons had a say as well, but they were the gentry and the business class, trading class, rather than there wasn't a peasant vote, or
the unwashed masses didn't have a say.
Hey, up the unwashed masses, I'm sure that's where we all came from, or most of us anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's move on to Labour then, since they're the favorites in this race. Thoughts on Keir Starmer's Keir Starmer, I guess. And what is he trying? He's trying to connect with the working class as well, with stories of his dad. And then are Labour's chances as good as everyone thinks? And Sue obviously thinks not so much, perhaps. But what does everyone think about that?
Well, I've got personal experience with Keir Starmer. I had a lunch with him once. I sit between him and the Solicitor General and the Labour Solicitor General. And I was savaged by him in a court once. Well, savaged is like being savaged by a sheep who was that poor. And I don't like him. As a person, I don't like him. I don't like him. I wouldn't ever vote for anything he led because of this, because having met him, he's an opportunist. Pure and utter opportunist.
Yeah, it does. He's not the only one, but it definitely does feel that way.
Yeah. But when you actually meet them personally, you then get an idea of what they truly are like.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, do you believe that he believes in what his party represents? Or
he was very left. When I met him in court, he was very, very left-wing, representing an anarchist. And he believed in that, and he spoke out loudly about that. Have you seen any of that in his stuff at the moment? Absolutely nothing. It's changed everything to get power.
Right, yeah. Did you say anarchist?
Yes, anarchists.
That's very strange for the left wing. Yeah, that's a
he was very much one of these. When he first barrister, he's one of these that represented all those sort of people from the CND and all those sort of people, defending the indefensible sometimes.
Right. So, do you think if they get into power, because he for a while they've been trying to present as center
Well, he's a
left.
communist for a long, long time, and then he's thrown him under a bus, hasn't he? To get
Yeah,
power.
exactly. Yeah. So do you think
You
he'll
know.
swing the party back further left or try to stay center left?
Well, the left's going to start off again, aren't they? As soon as they get power, they're going
Right,
to start
well.
pulling them left anyway.
Yeah.
And whatever he does, he won't be able to stop them. They'll fracture, as they always do.
Yeah, I think it's already fairly far left, to be honest. I think that's why the Tories have been sliding that way as well, I mean, socially. But what do you think, John? Thoughts on the Labour?
I don't have that direct experience of Starmer to have a very bad impression of him, but then I don't have much of an impression of him. I mean, he has seemed to be trying to pull the party to the right, but purely on as you say, well, opportunism, what we call it, but what common sense of that seemed to be what needed to be done to get them elected after the last few failures. How sincerely he would try and hold to that in power. And I mean, for me, the issue there is the 2-child cap. I mean, I was moved to more or less supporting him when he declared that he wasn't going to be in a rush to end it. And I don't know whether he, that doesn't amount to him like me saying it's a good thing. It's just saying he can't afford to scrap it at the moment. But how big how much pressure there is to burst that dam once he's in there. There's papers like The Guardian and lots of individuals are working very hard on breaking that down. And whether he will want to resist that, I don't know. I mean, I would say there are better things they could spend the money on, but if they had the money, but I think the claim was actually we don't have the money, so it's academic.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point, the money issue, because of course that in some ways takes us to COVID, which is sort of highlights the idea that usually in an election, each party attacks the other parties for their failings, which they can do still. I mean, Tories have lots of failings, but none of the parties stood up to the way the Tories managed COVID.
I would say the late Labour would have been egging them on to throw more money at it.
Yeah. So all of them are complicit in the biggest failings of the government recently in the last 4 years, let's say.
Well, of course, Corbyn during COVID didn't do anything, did he? He sat on the fence.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he didn't want to drop one way or the other, did he?
Yeah. They all got scared of doing the wrong thing and being labeled as the person who destroyed the country. Meanwhile, they destroyed the country.
Can I just pick you up as well? I mean, if you know history, you will know that Labour was originally the party of the working class, and particularly working class men. It was meant to represent all the terrible conditions at the time and the way industry was structured and all that. It was meant to be the voice of the working class. And of course, a lot of the MP had proper, well, not just not having Sky TV, but proper poverty-stricken childhoods. They grew up, whatever, they fought their way to become MPs. And I think Labour, of all, have forgotten that. Because apart from the occasional token person who's, I am working class and I am proud of it, the vast majority come from the very comfortable middle classes.
Oxford and Cambridge.
Oxford and Cambridge. And you say about the two-child cap, but there are times when people end up on benefits because of things completely out of their control, and it's created massive misery. So a party which is meant to be representing working people and the poorest of the poor actually doesn't like the poorest of the poor. They really rather not think about them at all. And Gordon Brown, who as Prime Minister was a bit of a mixed bag, but he was saying publicly a few weeks ago how disgraceful it was that Labour had their 6 points of policy, but they actually didn't mention anything to do with child poverty. So the trouble with Keir Starmer, he's like the rest of them. He just wants to be Prime Minister.
Yeah, I think that's a good.
But he doesn't give a vibe of how he's going to do it, or there's no sense really of passion.
Or connection, right? Connection with, like you said, connection with the people they're supposed to be representing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I think that's my feeling as well. As you look at Keir Starmer and you're like, this guy, how could he consider to possibly represent the working class?
Well, you'll have to define the working class. In the CPS, when he was at the CPS, he absolutely destroyed it. He moved the goal line, you call it that, from 70% chance of getting a prosecution to 90% chance of getting a prosecution before they went forward. So I mean, unless they thought they were 90% guilty, they weren't even going to put it before the court. And what's he going to do when he gets the country then? Is he going to do a similar sort of thing? Make wise decisions like that?
Yes, we're not too hopeful of what happens when he gets. I'll say when he gets to power, because I do feel that he probably will. But well, there's always a chance. We can hope with Sue that maybe it's not so cut and dry.
Yeah, I mean, in the privacy of the polling booth, what the actual decision on the piece of paper is different from what you say to the opinion poll collector. But the question is it that much different for so many people? I don't know. But I do think on that point of identifying with the working class, I think there is a distinction between the working class, as in the working class in full-time employment, in not the lowest paid job, still manual work, say, between them and people in long-term unemployment. Now, there's a view of Labour as or as their target market as being people on unemployment benefit long-term, and then there's a view of it as the workers, as in people who work. Now, I think originally Labour were very strongly behind the unionized Labour, which was the privilege. They were the elite of the workforce. They were not the poor. They even before Labour came along, they weren't the poor. They were. They were not rich, but they weren't poor as some people were poor in those days.
I guess that would be the purpose of the union, wouldn't it?
To protect their income and not be too concerned about who else wasn't protected.
The aristocracy of Labour is like it's terrible.
There's the other problem, of course. A lot of Labour MPs are sponsored by the union, so they'll be getting their kicks in soon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's take the third main party, the Lib Dems. The who? No. Sorry. But I couldn't resist. But basically, I mean, in Harrogate, where we are, I mean, they are the one of the top two parties that challenge. Usually they haven't won in a while, but I believe I've heard that Harrogate is the
target seat.
Although they got in trouble recently here. Chances, where are they going to fall? Are they going to be third? Are they going to be fourth? Might be.
Well, that depends on you count percentage of the vote to number of seats, or the number of seats percentage of votes. Because if you take the last election where UKIP got more votes than the SNP, the SNP got 30 seats and UKIP got 0. The number of people who vote for a party doesn't mean the number of seats they get. And the Lib Dems are a very clever thing. They're targeting. They're targeting quite a lot of seats, and Harrogate being one of them, to win particular seats. So they may get a fair few seats.
There's an interesting distinction between targeting a seat. I mean, anybody can target. I mean, I know a lot. I mean, maybe confident, but I know Labour are targeting some seats, and they're not. Whatever the local candidate might be saying, they're not really working hard in some areas. But there's a difference between that and actually getting the votes. Now, why Harrogate should have such a strong, relatively strong Lib Dem performance, I have no idea. I mean, the kind of things I can think of is that there are a lot of people here who want to be able to say it's not my fault whichever side wins.
It could be.
and it may have, until a couple of years, have been I'm all right, Jack, on the basis of immigration, of saying, well, yes, a lot of the population are anti-immigration and are voting on that basis, but we don't have any here, so why should we care, sort of thing. But that has changed in the last couple of years, and I again, seeing that as the main issue, the most significant issue on which, and you were mentioning colourfully how similar the Conservatives and Labour are, and not the only one, but one of the key issues on which they seem pretty hard to tell apart, or put a cigarette paper between, is immigration. And I'm thinking, well, with a lot of people wanting it to be tougher, so I'm thinking, well, what is the value of a party whose critical difference from them is that they're even softer on immigration? That isn't what was, that isn't the offer that's missing. I just don't see the point of them, and I don't see why a place like Harrogate would sensibly give them that much support.
Yeah, I think you might have noted something that they're like the soft Labour in a way, right? So people here in this kind of posh area
Mm.
don't necessarily want to vote
Yeah.
Labour, but they don't want to vote Tories.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I look at Lib Dems as the steam valve. They're basically that they're supposed to be the steam valve, the
Yeah.
third party where
Mm.
people can go if they don't want to vote for one of the other two
Yes.
parties.
Mm.
Now, of course, that's changed in recent years because now we have a plethora of parties, which we'll get to if we have time. Well, I think we'll go rapid fire through the next ones maybe until we get to one key one. But yeah, so that's how I see Lib Dems as well, because it is a bit weird otherwise, you say. But I think in Harrogate, it's generally been around 2/3, 1/3 Tories.
Well, yeah. Although you wouldn't know that from a quick glance at the histogram they show every year.
I know.
You'd come up with a very different impression.
Yes, I really, that offends me whenever they post that offends me because that to me is challenging the democratic process when they say, oh, well, Labour can't win here. And I don't want Labour to win here, but when they say Labour can't win here because they've never won here, I look at that and I say, no, you don't tell me how to vote, right? I'm not going to vote for Labour, but I'm not doing it because you're telling me not to do it, right? Like, so don't tell me that they can't win, because anyone should be able to win anywhere.
I think the other thing you're missing is the personality. When Phil Willis, who was Lib Dem, won in 97, the current Dear Robert, as one of our neighbours called him, that Robert Banks, who was the MP, and she was a dyed-in-the-wool, paid-up Conservative, lovely lady, and even she said, Dear Robert is such a lovely man, but he doesn't do anything, and that was one of his strongest supporters. So whereas somebody else who's come in or has been a truly outstanding MP for the area, I don't think Andrew Jones is very nice, but that was not much she can say about him. But if you have a very dynamic MP, whatever the party is, they may get in just purely on personality, how they're perceived locally, and whether they're a good egg or not.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because that is really the dichotomy in the voting, isn't it? It's whether you're voting for your local representative or whether you're voting kind of strategically on a national level. And I think there are more or less two kinds of voters in that regard, aren't there? And so that also throws a little bit of a kink in the works of trying to predict who's going to come out on top.
And I think Andrew Jones's hallmark stock in trade has been to appear more or less apolitical, but for the kind of dynamic MP you'd want, you would expect him to be in some way at the fringes of his party. He'd be talking more, probably not radically disagreeing with them, but much keener on some aspect than the general party is. Whereas his approach is not to offend, and I'm told that he and some other Conservative MPs in constituencies with a major Lib Dem opposition rather than Labour called themselves the love bombers, and the idea was to love bomb the Lib Dems into winning the vote. So basically, they're not going to appear dynamic or thrusting in any kind of way, except as Lib Dems. In fact, I did rather think, well, wouldn't it have been, wouldn't we have had more choice if the Lib Dems had adopted Andrew Jones as their candidate this time, and they probably have won with him, but then we would have had a Conservative MP, Conservative candidate to choose against him.
All right, so moving on to the other parties. So the Green Party comes to mind as one that's been around for a while. Any thoughts on them? We'll do this quickly because they're kind of just hanging on in the wings, but
they're very impractical. They're full of lovely, warm, fuzzy ideas. But you think, come on, there's a real world out there. Get out there.
Yeah, it's a very one-dimensional party that with a rose-colored
any
glass.
party that's got one main theme can win, because apart from managed Brexit, which is the one main theme, and the Tories won with that. Normally, if you've got one main theme, you might win the occasional seat, but you're not going to win many.
Right.
And in Brighton is one of those places where they will go to the extremes, because they started off the Pride demonstration and what they call marches first off, and they're very diverse down there. So you'd expect Green to get front seats there. But have you seen Harrogate? I couldn't.
No.
Yeah. I think I would disagree on the one main issue theme. I think they were one main theme, and I'm probably impractical enough that I would agree to them. But unfortunately, they've changed for the worse since when they were one main theme. Now Palestine is a higher priority, or at least an integral priority to CO2.
Hmm.
But so are lots of other social issues, including immigration. Now, I don't, I would like to vote for a Green Party. It wouldn't be a party that advocated growing the UK population. I mean, I don't see how that can possibly fit into a Green Party agenda. So,
Right.
there's the expression watermelon for them, which is green on the outside and red on the inside.
yeah.
Well, they are Marxist Party, aren't they? In
Yeah.
real terms.
Usually are, yeah, the Greens.
Yes, they are Marxist by descent.
And I guess so. What you're suggesting is they've evolved into a social justice party,
Yes.
which actually fits with their
Yes.
Marxist ideas
Yeah.
too, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and with their own, and the definition of justice, that basically the idea that justice, fairness, equality, there's no question that, that is.
Well, they get rid of
what
defence
justice
tomorrow.
is.
We'll keep knocking on the door, wouldn't
So okay, Reclaim Party, which you guys have already mentioned that you didn't even remember they existed. In fact, they came on the radar pretty much only, and this is Lawrence Fox's party, only with this election because they dropped out and offered something like £5,000 to any political candidate who would go along with their policies that they had in mind. So anyone who was willing to commit to those policies, they would support them with £5,000 donation. That's about the only place that they've kind of come on the radar in this election. So I think we can skip over to, okay, there's not much to say about independents. They're not really a block, are they? They're sort of a scattered bunch.
Well, there are one or two around the country who will take votes off whichever parties have fallen out with.
Right.
Like Corbyn in Wembley and other people like that. They will take votes. They will take votes off their party. In Scotland, that'll be a very great issue because a lot of the SNP have gone independent because they've fallen out with the hierarchy. So
Right.
not just England, the rest of the country, there's going to be independents who will have a difference and will get into the Commons.
And the Harrogate Independent is quite recently ex-Conservative councillor. So I don't know what his personal. He must feel he's got some personal support.
That's right.
But
That's
that
good.
would be
He stood
something
in the
more
mayoral
for
election as well,
Giles
didn't
to
he?
worry about. I mean, who knows? That might be, his 3 votes might be the 3 that take 100 Jones down to defeat her.
Yeah, if no one shows up to vote, yeah.
Yes.
No.
It's happened before.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I wouldn't be surprised this election. It's gone weird because of the last party we'll mention, which is the Reform Party. They've kind of kickstarted the actual fun parts of the election, I suppose, this time around. It was a bit of a sleeper until Nigel Farage joined in. So we basically have 2 players in the Reform Party. Richard Tice, who was sort of holding it for a while, holding the torch, and then Nigel Farage, who's jumped in and is sort of the populist and has sort of taken the attention. So thoughts on those 2 and Reform's chances on unseating the Tories?
I don't think they're as great as they think they are. Nigel Farage is an unashamed populist. He doesn't care what he says. I mean, he would be far left of Corbyn if he thought that was more likely to get him noticed. I don't think he's got any particular principles as such. And okay, some people will vote for him with his anti-immigration, anti-this and anti-that. But a lot of people, again, you've always got to factor in personalities, whether people actually like the candidate. And I have to say, on the mayoral, it's quite weird, on the mayoral contest for the North Yorkshire, we sat and watched a debate with all the candidates. And I have to say, I was turned off by all of them, and I actually spoilt my ballot paper as a broadcast. So that sometimes comes into play as well.
Yeah, that was something I was considering and still am considering, the spoiling the ballot as a kind of protest thing. I do suspect from what I'm listening to that that Nigel has a pretty strong following. He's kind of a Trump-like figure, isn't he? And
very much.
very bad or very good. But that's the point. He's very divisive, and the people who follow him do really follow him. So it'll be a matter of how does that play into the.
But it's very strange where he's standing, because he's going to Clacton. I don't know if you've ever been to Clacton. We've got a place called Jaywick, which used to be the holiday home for the people from London, the local chalets. And it's now the poorest place in the United Kingdom. And that's part of the Clacton constituency, quite a large part of it. And so I wonder how they're going to vote for him. Are they voting for him because of immigration? Because they don't want, these people coming in stealing their jobs, or, You know, they'll be the ones wanting houses that they're in. Or what's he hoping for there?
Yeah, because reform is really running on what more or less two campaigns, two platforms. One is immigration, and the other one is get rid of the Tories. Basically, those are their two platforms, more or less, right?
I think the whole manifesto for those parties that will struggle to win a seat, let alone become a government, you have to regard it just as, yes, we have to produce a manifesto. It doesn't. It seems a bit forced to start costing the reforms financial balance sheet and such. It's just it's just a bit of fun basically, that just because that's what a party contesting most of the seats should have. I mean, the issue is immigration. I mean, I don't even know that. I mean, probably the Conservatives are going down either way. I mean, votes going to Labour, votes, as you say, going to abstentions or spoiled ballot papers. I think that for me, the reason for voting for them would be to register the fact that actually immigration is an issue, and a rump Conservatives looking to reform, if they think they can go back to business as usual, saying one thing, as they've been doing since Maggie Thatcher, with we understand that you feel swamped. Well, and you think, oh yes, the government get it. Yeah, the government get it. What they're going to do about it is the exact opposite, but the government do get it. Andrew Jones got it. I mean, he spoke to me on the doorstep in 2010 when he first stood and asked my key issues, one of which was the level crossing in Starbeck, which nothing has been
Never been
and the
done
other
about.
which was immigration, which he told me how many, how universal it was, how everyone felt strongly about that, sort of hinting that he'd taken that on board. But no, I've taken on board I hear what you say, as we say in the civil service, when we're not, we're going to ignore what you say.
Yeah,
Just vote for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, it's to say, there isn't a way forward for a party of the right that isn't serious on that, and whatever they say now, and it can't, cannot be trusted. I mean,
But what
they've
will
had
be
enough chance.
interesting though, if by some bizarre maverick does get in, not necessarily Nigel Farage, but one of the reform candidates does get in, and then you have the situation where perhaps it's a hung parliament, that one or two MPs may wield a lot of power.
yeah,
Isn't it?
undoubtedly they're
Up in
looking
North
for something
Yorkshire.
like that. Yeah.
As an independent, held power in North Yorkshire for about 5 years. He had his vote,
Yeah.
and he used it for his constituents.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the current state of the country in relation to the world as well, I think, and considering what I feel Labour will be doing if they get in, I personally believe that the best way forward in the next 4 years is going to be a very chaotic parliament with no majorities. Because if one of them gets a majority, it's just going to be where I think they need to be challenged constantly by a strong opposition. And I think that's the only way that's going to be reasonably going forward. Even though it'll mean less things get done in this particular scenario, I think that's actually better, because the more things they do right now, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much hope of that. I mean, I'm only going by the opinion polls, but I don't doubt Labour getting a working majority. And I mean, Sunak may try and frighten us with a thing. Oh, don't give them a massive majority, you'll be giving them a blank check. Well, I mean, enough, a majority is enough to I mean, I don't think he's got many people.
Oh, Wilson managed for
the
6
issues.
seats, didn't he? For a long time. Just for a 6-seat majority. So if they get any sort of win, they're in.
Yeah, so I kind of feel it, but it is interesting to watch the rhetoric and back and forth, and the fear mongering. Oh, we don't want to let them in, but then also the play of the two parties to try and exclude the third parties, especially as they feel a challenge from reform working towards trying to get into the opposition. There's this narrative almost that you better have it as only a two-party system, otherwise you're going to cause all this chaos, right? So you start seeing this stuff in the media and things like that. This playing to the status quo almost, which is interesting.
I don't have much optimism about a large representation of minority parties. I see it more important in terms of the number of votes and knowing that those votes will be in play next time, and whatever they offend us on will make that particular vote stronger. And again, without wanting to harp on about immigration, but if they were to carry on the previous trajectory, the reform vote for them, or whatever other party, or a reformed Conservative Party that takes that up, would get strong. I would see large numbers of votes for the minor parties as a threat to whoever does get power, and whoever thinks of reforming the Conservative opposition as to a direction that they would be.
Can I say something about immigration, though? We've had mass legal immigration since Tony Blair's death. We've always had immigration.
Right.
It's nothing new since the Romans, probably before that.
Only long Canadians.
I think they went the other way,
but not on the same scale, and
No.
not voluntarily.
But the problem was we have had mass immigration. A lot of it has been hugely beneficial to us as a country. But what Conservatives haven't done, and what Labour's before them, and Labour aren't saying they're going to do now, the vast majority of people come to this country come here legally, or they come as refugees, like people from Hong Kong, from Syria, whatever. They're here legally. So they get jobs, they work, they pay taxes. What none of the political parties actually think, well, our population has several million over the last couple of decades. All these people working, paying tax, which by and large, they're younger people. But the other side of it is, if you have young people, they're very inconvenient. They have children, they need services, but their tax money and our tax money hasn't been put back into expanding services like NHS, education, even things like prisons and police, because they're not all good. They're not sexy, definitely not sexy. But so there's been no investment. So when you've got people at the bottom of the pile and they see all these people coming in, a lot of envy, but actually the general things that we rely on and accept, they've got worse because there's more pressure of people, but there's no investment to make the system work.
Yeah.
And that is the major problem with immigration. Yes, that gets to a tipping point where you'll say, we can't take any more people in, but I suspect that's probably not quite there yet. And it's a problem the whole world the whole Western world is struggling with.
Yeah.
But there is an issue. Fine, come and staff our care homes, come and work in our shops and do all these low paid jobs, because the majority who came in, certainly when Eastern Europeans were allowed in, were the very low grade minimum wage type jobs. But successive governments haven't said, right, well, we need more houses, we need more school places, we need more access to health services, things that they are paying for, the same as us through all their taxation. And of course, it's no, we've got to manage it better. We've got to be more cuter about these things. And none of the parties are actually addressing, when you've got a population that's gone out. They make a big fuss about people coming in legally. In real terms, I'd say a drop in the ocean, but that's not a good phrase at the moment, is it? And that's where the politicians, they have no ideas.
Well, I agree with some of that for sure. As the resident immigrant here,
Resident alien, if you've seen that program.
I would question whether I haven't seen demographics, so I would be curious as to the age demographics of most of the legal immigrants, because we came over, I was just under 40, so I don't necessarily consider that young, but
but you're not sort of expensive pensions and blocking up the dirt.
No, we're not on the other end either. Yeah, so we're somewhere in the middle working segment of the population. Yeah, I do agree that. So from a immigrant perspective, our main issue is against illegal immigrants, of course, which are, as you say, they are a lot less in numbers, but because they're unvetted, you don't know who they are, and to get into the country, they've committed a crime to start with, or more than one crime. So you already have a propensity for crime to start just by arriving in the country.
Yeah, you paid a gang or something.
Yeah, so and you crossed the border illegally without
yeah,
identification.
all that stuff.
So you pay your money back.
So then the percentage of criminals, serious criminals, will be much higher in that group, which makes it much more dangerous to allow them in as well. I would suggest possibly there's too many immigrants in general coming in. I don't know, but I do know that in England, the birth rate is quite low, like most of Europe. And so there is a certain need for a replacement level. Well, unless you just let the population of the country drop. But I do agree with what you're saying. And there are a large percentage of immigrants, even the legal ones, who will send a lot of their income back overseas. And that's obviously, financially detrimental to the country as well. Not necessarily people who come from the West, but let's say Eastern Europeans, Southeast Asians, Africans, they will often send a large amount of their income to families back in their home countries as well. So yeah, there's definitely a huge financial burden, even from certain segments of the legal immigrants as well.
But even so, if you're legal, you're paying taxes.
But at least we're paying taxes.
It's a sad fact of life, we all pay taxes. The taxes are meant to fund what we consider essential services. And what successive politicians have said, the matter, we need the workers, but we're not willing to invest in people who come in, with the result that services get squeezed and stretched and just generally are not, even looking back 20, 30 years ago. And when we're lucky, we can ring up our GP and we get doctor's appointments on the same day. But I know all the wrong reasons, unfortunately, because we're not very well. But you do hear of people waiting a long time to see a GP, things like that.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole series of episodes for the podcast on. We can take each service and analyze where it's failing and what needs to be done. And I think we'll talk about NHS soon as well. But John, you had something you want to say.
First of all, can I explain why you're an exception to the and also on a personal?
I know why I'm an exception.
Yeah, but I mean, also make a point. I personally have no animosity towards anyone who comes here. Only towards people who let them come here, and the fact that so many of them are legal is an indictment of the government. But it seems to me a lot of the arguments for immigration pretty much mirror the arguments for slavery. Basically we need the labour, and among the more liberal aspect of slave owners, the more Christian slave owners, yes, we should be improving the general care and not overworking our slaves as much, but still it comes down to that we aim to show a profit on them, or why would we why would
I don't mean it like that, John.
Show a profit.
What I'm looking, okay, we're a little bit insulated from this because we're Harrogate, so we're terribly posh. But if you look at some of the inner cities where you already have people who are very, very poor, that generations of poverty sort of thing.
In
there, and seeing people come in. So what you find at the bottom is people fighting for the same very thin slice of bread.
Yeah,
that's where the problem is, and that's why you get a lot of bigotry and prejudice. Because I used to work down in Bradford, which was quite an interesting job. I won't go into it here, and there was a lot of criminality around. This doesn't go for the entire population I Hayston had, but the Pakistanis, they thought they were the they were the switched on ones. The Indians thought they were vastly superior to all of them because they were Indians and not Pakistanis. And as for the poor old Bangladeshis, well, they the lowest of the low. So even within different communities, there's often prejudice and bias. But if you're right at the bottom and you can't afford anything and you're fighting for what little there is, somebody else coming into your patch. East End riots in the beginning of the 20th century, various Jewish refugees coming into the East End, and there were big fights about, well, they can't come in because there isn't enough to sustain us anyway, never mind putting more people.
Now riots in Middlesbrough.
Riots in Middlesbrough, yeah. That's South Shields.
But you are pointing out that there's a fairly universal trait of identification with one's own group, possessiveness on behalf of that. Our problem is that we've identified that as a fault in ourselves, and we try and overcome that by ramming immigration down our throats, and calling opposition racist. It seems to be a mistake to call something racism if objectively it applies to almost every other national group in the world. You've made the term racist redundant when you do that. It is natural. And I would, making that comparison with other people, I would point out that in somewhere we have the worst immigrant native conflict, which is Gaza and Palestine. The initial Jewish settlers were incredibly hardworking. You couldn't fault them. They didn't go to Palestine to live off the Turkish welfare system, but that didn't endear them. I mean, various people like Lawrence Arabia thought, a large Jewish population are just what this country needs because they will really pick up the economy and move with it. That didn't cut any ice with the Palestinians.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because, again, as my own experiences has been in multiple countries, that you do, even if you don't associate with your own group, because it's kind of hard to find Canadians. We sort of blend in everywhere. But
it's carrying the hockey stick as you go.
Yeah, that's exactly. But we do tend to cluster with other foreigners, at least, just because it's difficult to integrate into the native population. You already have your set family and friend groups, you have your set culture and everything. And so there is exactly what you're saying. Like, there's this almost natural way of creating these communities that comes from immigration. And I do feel you're right in that it's a difficult balance, that when we need to have this conversation properly, because you want people to integrate into the country, but this compartmentalization naturally happens. So how you blend the two things, like, I don't have an answer for that. But they have to somehow be melded without using like the term racist all the time, right? Because that's just not helping anything. But I think as we're getting long,
before you wind us up, actually, I didn't shoehorn in that, just why you're exceptional, and I would go further than reform in wanting zero net immigration, but I would say on a bilateral level. So I would say Brits going to Spain does not cancel with Indians coming from India. Now, on a bilateral level, I would guess that Canada, we by rights would take a lot, if a lot more Canadians wants to come, which they don't, we ought to take them, because the balance is very much in our favor of sending people. So you're okay. But some other countries, you say, well, look, well, I'm sorry, you're great people, but we've already got quite a lot of you, and hardly any of our people have gone to you. So sorry, you'll have to wait until your country is more attractive.
Yeah. Well. On that note, we'll look for John to run in the next election. But
yes. I did consider it. We talked about that, didn't we?
But I think we're pretty much done for our discussion today on this election. I wanted to do one quick thing as we go. Your pick for who's going to win the election. I'm putting you on the spot. Don't weasel out of it. So we'll go with John first.
Well, I'm happy to answer, but I have to admit,
quick answer though.
Just repeating to you what the opinion polls say. Yes, Labour. So I'm not watching any television, so I don't know. Right. I haven't noticed anyone making any terrible faux pas that would change that. So yeah, I mean, I haven't got any reason to argue with that weight of data.
All right, Sue, what do you think?
I think possibly Labour, more likely a hung parliament. I don't think it's as clear cut as that.
Okay, and Jed?
I think Labour by a landslide, unless he imposes it up for them.
Right, yeah. I'm feeling Labour as well, but I'm not as certain as I was that it's going to be a large majority anyway, or even a majority.
No, I don't think it'll be.
They're going to bring something out like Keir Starmer for the election, and just how damaging it is, I don't know.
Yeah. All right, well, that's about all we have time. So thanks for listening to Doublethink Dialogues. If you've enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment to join the conversation.